Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So, now I want to talk about Sharia and why it's important. And this fits in with why I'm a Muslim because understanding and learning about Sharia is one of the reasons why I am a Muslim, one of the main reasons, actually. Because when we look at different religions comparatively, we see that Islam is really the only major religion that has a strict codified source of laws with a very unique and specific methodology to arriving at the interpretation of law, right? So that's the fiqh sciences, the hadith sciences, how the scholars interpreted the ijma', right? What all the scholars said, the fact that we have the Salaf al-Salih, the sayings of the Prophet, the Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Prophet's generation, the generation after that, and the generation after that. All of these give us an objective measuring point for whether we're doing something moral or immoral, or even amoral, right? Even in fiqh, we have these distinctions and categories. So it's a very unique and beautiful thing. Now, someone might say, "Oh, it's what about these barbaric things and so forth?" So let's get into that. First of all, there's a lot of propaganda against Sharia that people have been inculcated with from a very young age. Think about a Disney movie like Aladdin, where orphan steals the loaf of bread or or the food, and he's about to get his hand chopped off. Even in a movie like The Scorpion King, right? Where you have The Rock, Dwayne Johnson was the main character in that movie, and he's about to assassinate one of the kings, and he sees a little kid who stole some food. He's a poor orphan boy. He stole some food, and now they're going to chop off his hands. And even though he's not a Muslim and no one's a Muslim there, but they're associating that specific scene with Sharia law, with Islam, with desert people, etc. So it's very important to note that this is actually not true. If an orphan steals a loaf of bread, they will never get their hands cut off. For someone to get his hand cut off in Sharia law, according to the law, there has to be a certain amount or a certain value beyond which he stole. So he has to steal something very valuable. Cannot cut someone's hand off for stealing food. That would never happen. So imagine a world where gangsters and people in the mafia have a hand chopped off whenever they embezzle or rob people or steal money. Now, not only does the whole community see their hand cut off and fear them less, but the fear increases in the gang members and among the gang members when they see, oh, a couple of our members have their hand chopped off. Not only is it a mark of shame for them that they failed, but it's also a mark of fear that they understand that they can't do stuff like this. Imagine a world where very, very corrupt politicians who embezzle millions of dollars from the people get a hand cut off, and now, whenever they try and run for another election, people always see that, and that's a reminder that they don't get away with their crimes. This is much different than a system where all of your tax money is going into providing for criminals in prison who get out of prison, can't find a job because they have a bad record, and then continue to steal, right? So one, the execution of the punishment is swift, it's certain, it's sure, it inspires fear, and once it's done, it's done, right? That person, if he got his hand cut off, could still choose to live an honest life, and people would know, yo, he's not really going to do anything or harm me because he has only one hand, right? And it's also a deterrent for people not to do things like this and involve themselves in banditry and bigotry, brigandry, brigand, brigandy. Sorry, not like a brigand, like a bandit, basically. So, not bigotry. That's the different word. So, what about something like people say, oh, convert them by force? First of all, there's a verse in the Quran where it says you cannot convert someone by force, right? It says it in the Quran, and I'll bring the verse in because I don't have it off the top of my head. And we have so many different countries that have very large, robust, and healthy religious communities. I'm originally come from Egypt. We have a very significant Coptic Christian community that is native to the Egyptian population, and they've never been forced to convert. If Islam took the route of the colonialists, then sure, you would have had more Muslims, but that never happened. It took over 200 years for the population in Egypt to slowly start converting to Islam. What After the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you had the Khalif Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and the second Khalif after him was Umar radiallahu anhu. When Umar radiallahu anhu had taken over Egypt, what we had was that he did not want the Muslims mixing and mingling with the population. He actually built a second city, a garrison city for the troops near the main city. And this was called Fusutat. And Fusutat, over time, merchants coming in and out, people visiting the different sections of town to do business and so forth, increasing of home, increasing of the population. Those two cities, the garrison city of the Muslims and the original city, merged into one city and became what we know today as Cairo, the capital of Egypt. So the Muslims were intelligent and were sensitive and aware of population differences. They didn't force their religion on the people. This is a very important point to note. But then someone might say, okay, well, why did they conquer? So one must understand that if you have two nations, nation A and nation B, nation A is building up military resources, getting stronger. Nation B is going the peaceful route. They're not doing anything, and they're just chilling, and they're worshiping, and they're sitting at their mosque, or they're sitting at their church or whatever. Which nation is going to be at a disadvantage? Obviously, nation B. So Islam teaches that you must be in a position of strength. How can someone be on the truth and allow someone who's upon falsehood or upon evil to conquer them and instill their laws based on falsehood in the land? So Islam teaches that Muslims must be strong, and Muslims must establish this strength to share the light of Islam with others, which is why the conquest that Muslims went through during the early years of the golden generation, the three generations, was not called conquest. It was called futuhat, openings. Later on, they were called conquests because of corrupt Muslim rulers and so forth, and people that were fighting for, worldly power and so forth. But we, in early Islamic history, we call them openings, right? And again, people were not forced to be Muslim. Rather, evil and corruption was removed, and people were allowed to make the choice to be Muslim, or they can continue on in the religion of their forefathers. And you have even in Ethiopia, for example, when Muslims were fighting the Ethiopians, they came to an agreement that, hey, look, we'll stop fighting you actually, and we'll send our scholars and our people in to give da'wah, to spread Islamic message, and you can send your priests and your pastors in to give da'wah, to spread your message, and we will make it like a verbal exchange. Obviously, the Muslims were confident that their da'wah would spread and that the Christian da'wah wouldn't. But this also goes back to a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad said to leave Ethiopia alone, not to conquer it. There's a hadith on that as well. So you have different ways of going about this. It's not just what people think that, oh, Islam just conquered everybody, forced everyone to become Muslim. This is simply historically false. And I would recommend someone to watch the YouTube channel called Blogging Theology. I'll link his YouTube channel. Has some very good content where he goes over some of these historical facts. The next thing is the apostasy laws, right? So again, going back to the idea of, oh, the poor orphan boy who stole a loaf of bread and now he gets his hand cut off, and I said that that's false. Again, with the apostasy laws, they're trying to make it out like some angsty teenager, he's in his room, all he's doing is questioning religion, and now suddenly the police are going to come and kill this guy. That's not how it works. First of all, there are so many laws in Islam that it'd be very hard for you to be punished for it, right? So, for example, if someone does the crime of zina, they're supposed to be lashed 100 times. But how would they get caught? You'd have to have 4 witnesses. So this usually doesn't happen. So when we're talking about something like the crime of zina, it usually doesn't happen that someone's going to get caught by 4 witnesses. Then what's the purpose of it? Again, the purpose of it is not just to deter the person. It is to deter any movement based on immorality. So consider, for example, the song that came out a few days ago where the gay chorus was singing, "We are coming for your children." Now, that could never happen in a Muslim society. You might have, in a truly run Muslim society, you might have some Muslims who have some homosexual desires that might be practicing or acting upon these homosexual desires away from others, right? But by and large, those kind of things were dealt with by the community. The community would get involved, the scholars would get involved, the imams would get involved who love their people and love their community, say, look, you shouldn't do that, you should stop drinking, you shouldn't do this sin, right? When does it become a problem? When someone starts preaching it publicly. Then that becomes the issue and Sharia law becomes implemented. So what does that have to do with apostasy? Quite clearly, people who have a problem with apostasy don't understand how nations work and don't understand how war works, right? When a nation goes to war with another nation, they don't always fight the other nation on the battlefield. In addition to that, they'll also send spies, they'll also try to sabotage, they'll also try to infiltrate. So you might have someone, for example, pretend to be loyal to his country, but he's recruiting for the communist cause, for example, and he's an agent of the communists. So would America as a government allow someone being paid by a communist country to simply preach and practice communism and try and invite people into the communist way? Or would they say, look, you're a spy or you're a saboteur, and we're going to either execute you or kick you back out to your original country? This is exactly what we have in Islam. You can't just, the apostasy laws are there to protect Muslims and Islamic society from spies, saboteurs, and the internal warfare, right? So the war laws in Islam is to protect Muslims from the external enemies, and the apostasy laws are to protect Islam and Muslims from the internal enemies. Now, you're not really going to have someone like how they try to portray, oh, this poor kid, he's just kind of questioning his faith, he has questions, he's learning, why did they kill him? That doesn't happen like that. What it usually is someone getting paid by another country or by another agency to cause problems in a Muslim land. And then from his speech, people realize, hey, this guy is not truly a Muslim. He's up to something. Then those laws come through. And in history, we have cases where the death penalty or execution was not enacted upon the apostate people. Rather, for example, they were kicked back to their own lands when it was discovered what their affiliation was or who their affiliation was with. And this might have been in exchange for Muslim prisoners that were in that other territory or so forth. These things have happened in history, right? So that's just an important note. So for people that have a problem with apostasy or jihad or so forth, those type of people, I would say they have an unrealistic viewpoint of how nations operate with each other and amongst each other. You know, you always have spies, and you have laws against infiltration or a country or a company coming in and selling data or important information back to their home country if they're operating in a host country, like what's going on between America and China. You also have laws against sabotage. Again, for example, you have professors who are Chinese who are teaching in a college, might try and steal some information or might try and push some propaganda pieces. And the American government, if they're smart or they can prove the connection, usually kick those people out or try them. Other countries do the same thing. The apostasy laws are no different and have a similar function, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Of course, I know some people might disagree with me and say that no, that's not how it works. You just kill people if they say that they're not a Muslim anymore. And I'm sure that certainly happens. But again, how would the government know that someone left Islam, right? And we have stories in books like Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi's writings of Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious science, where we have many stories where people were committing a certain sin, a certain very big sin, and they weren't punished or lashed or imprisoned by the government because the government wouldn't know. There's not secret police running around. The community found out about it and they tried to help that person, talk to that person. It was a community effort. They didn't snitch to the government and the government wouldn't ask. Now, that's the difference between someone drinking in their house. Again, how would the government punish that person versus someone drinking in public? Then they get caught and then the government punishes them for drinking in public. And even in countries where drinking is legal, they still have something similar to this, right? So I can go on and on about this. Another example is people have a problem about hijab, right? Oh, who is Islam or who is the government to tell people what they should dress? If you live in any country, you are forced to dress in a certain way. Now, let me explain. If I, as an American, take off all of my clothes and walk in the street, I will be arrested for, I forget what the actual name of the charge is, but I will get arrested for walking naked in the street. That means I am forced to wear clothes. How much clothes is one supposed to wear? That differs, right, from country to country. But Islam has given us a set requirement of what we must wear, of what is considered modest. So there's nothing wrong with that. So I find Sharia to be a beautiful, complete system that, just like how God sent us so many signs of his existence, so we have so many signs of the correctness of a religion based on its laws. What other religion is combating this new world order propaganda filth that's coming out other than Islam? There is no other Islam. There's no other religion other than Islam that's combating this. Very basic example is interest. The interest bankers and the interest system, the monetary system, which is based on interest. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Is what is being used to manipulate and control the financial systems of countries all across the world, where it's a global economy. Islam is the only one that's very strict about forbidding interest. The sexual deviancies and the sexual deviant movements, the various ones that are out there, Islam is the last major holdout against these movements. Other religions have simply just let it in because they don't have that robust set of laws, including apostasy laws, to deal with these kinds of threats. So they caved in and they gave in, and they gave into secularism. What is secularism? Secularism is replacing God with the state. So these religions essentially said, we are false religions. We replace our God with the state. We basically submit to you. And Islam is the only religion that said, no, the state will not be replaced. God will not be replaced by the state. God is God. He is one, and we only bow down to him. I hope that made sense, everyone. Take care. Peace out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you have any questions or comments or disagreements, please leave it in the comments below. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Take care.